use one more, it's easier.
So welcome to our Satsang session. Thank you all for making it. And this is a session where we get to have a bit of a chit chat. Could be anything really. We've got no plans. It's just we see how it flows, how it rolls. And I guess the first thing is to throw it on you. Is there any questions at all about anything at all? I mean, apart from American politics or keeping it yoga related, retreat related.
Question: when you do dragonfly, you know how if you're doing dragonfly and you've got your arms down, either on a bolster, are you supposed to try and keep the pressure on the arms the same? Because I always find that I have to lean onto the opposite arm, or is it trying to keep...
Shape is dragonfly, wasn't it?
That's dragonfly.
That right?
Wizard.
No, she's saying
Lizard.
the legs up. This one. Are you?
Oh, dragon lunge.
Yeah.
Are you supposed to try and keep the same pressure on both arms?
Ideally.
Yeah.
That doesn't really matter. No, it's up to. It's really up to your body and what's going on there. So there's no. Whichever way you go, you're still going to be working on opening the hips.
It's more about the hips than trying to get the same.
Trying
to get your body
Yeah, because it's what do you call it? Like a what's an asymmetrical? Thank you. A non-symmetrical, asymmetrical pose.
Yeah.
It's always going to be kind of you're not working. If you're doing a symmetrical pose, then everything you want to try, even though maybe you're leaning to one side, you want to try and keep it symmetrical.
Yeah.
But in an asymmetrical pose, no, because you're working just really one side in one way and the other side in another way. Both sides are always going to be working. So no, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
But ideally, eventually, you get to a symmetrical.
I mean, it's just one way to approach it, symmetrically with the body down and the leg up or whatever. But it doesn't have to be.
It's just more flexibility. We'll get you back. We'll get both arms down.
Yeah.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
Which I think will open up over time.
Gravity wants your outside arm to go down.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So your centre of gravity is changing,
Yeah.
and that's why one arm feels different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also women's bodies are different. Our hips are at a different angle, and so we sit grounded differently if we try and do certain poses in women. Just where our pelvises are and where the tilt is, in the centre you're going to come out it differently. So might be part of it too.
Yeah, everybody's unique, so, and for sure, generally speaking, men and women's bodies are slightly different in certain ways. But that's a general speaking.
Arms go open. It's a generality, but the shape of the pelvis.
Absolutely.
The length of your arms.
Can I go over the 8 limbs?
Yes, now we're talking. What would you like to ask about the 8 limbs?
Just
An overview of the 8 limbs.
refreshing.
So does
What is
everyone?
the seventh limb?
Now we get to tell you what that 7th limb is. Yeah, no, thanks. That's always a good place to start a satsang, approaching the 8 limbs. So the 8 limbs, for some of you know it, some of you've heard it, you kind of know it, some of you never heard it, and going, what the hell is he even talking about? And it doesn't matter where you're at with that, because it's always an opportunity to either inquire into that knowledge for your first time or refresh it if you haven't as yet. Basically, the 8 limbs is what Patanjali is, we could say, one of the main yoga sort of gurus or teachers from a couple of thousand years ago, who wrote the Yoga Sutras. So the Yoga Sutras are like they're kind of like a Bible of yoga in a sense. They're the guideline of what yoga is. Actually, now that we start with that, I'm going to show you something. Now, even before the Yoga Sutras, I have this book here that I bought. I've got a few copies of this book too, which if anyone is interested to purchase, I've got a few for sale. It's called The Spiritual Foundation of Yoga, Understanding Nature and Spirit, by a guy called Suraj Sarod. He's the guy who's worked with one of my teachers, Eric, who a couple of you have met, who came to Thailand. If you've been on a Thailand retreat, you would have met Eric. And he's an Advaita Vedanta teacher. That's the non-dual philosophy of India and of yoga in essence. But what this book is about, the spiritual foundations of yoga, it's kind of like even the precursor to the Yoga Sutras. This is talking about Samkhya philosophy. Samkhya is a philosophy of yoga which then Patanjali took the essence of Samkhya and wrote the Yoga Sutras, which became in essence the philosophy of yoga. So we've all well, not all of us, but anyone who's let's say done a teacher training or investigated a bit more into yoga has heard about the Yoga Sutras as kind of like the foundation of yoga. But it's interesting to know that this predated yoga, as in the sutras of yoga. And this is a modern day interpretation of Samkhya. Modern day, in a sense, written recently. It's a rewriting of one of the ancient texts called the Samkhya Karika, which is the essence of the philosophy of Samkhya. And the kind of the title or the subtitle, Understanding Nature and Spirit, says it all. That is the essence of this philosophy. So it's the essence of understanding that within life, or life is all about, or life is, or that the world in which we live is this kind of marriage of nature and spirit, or this, you could say, this dance of nature and spirit. So the words, the Sanskrit words are Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha is spirit and Prakriti is nature. And in essence, it's saying that all of life, that everything that we see and experience through our senses and through our minds is Prakriti, is nature. But it's infused by Purusha. Purusha is spirit, which kind of relates to what I was talking about in a sense this morning with pranayam. When we work with pranayam, this is the energy behind all that we are, all that we do, all our movements. And the idea at a deeper level is that spirit is the essence of nature. But we have this kind of disconnect with realizing the spiritual aspect of life, of ourselves in particular. So we are spiritual beings having a human experience. We've all heard that expression. The human experience is the nature, expression of nature that we're experiencing. But at the core level of our being, we are spiritual. We are spirit. That's our true nature. That's our true essence. And so this book kind of looks into that, which then Patanjali, as I said, he grabbed that and said, all right, this is now yoga. And the 8 limbs of yoga is what Patanjali then uses or gives us as a roadmap to understanding yoga, which is in essence this, understanding nature and spirit, so the spiritual foundation. So yoga in itself means to yoke, to connect. And we talk about it's bringing together the different facets of who we are, so body, our mind, our spirit. Yeah, we've all got those body, mind, spirit. It's everywhere, isn't it? There's a festival, body, mind, spirit. It's in all the spiritual literature. And these are the different aspects of our being. But in essence, what yoga is, it's this connection to the spiritual aspect of who we are, because that's the one that's harder to kind of grasp with the mind, because we're very focused on connecting to our human experience through our senses, and so the essence of yoga, and what Patanjali says in the Yoga Sutras, in the second verse, he says yoga chitta vritti nirodha. He actually gives us the meaning of yoga. He says, well, what yoga is, according to his interpretation, yoga is, he says, yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Chitta is individual consciousness, or we could say mind to a certain degree. It incorporates a little more than just the Western psychological idea of mind, but in essence, mind. Yoga, chitta, vritti, nirodha. Vritti are the fluctuations, and nirodha is the cessation. So he's saying yoga is the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. So when the mind subsides, we actually can experience yoga. So mind is prakriti, is a part of nature, and when the mind subsides, we can experience our spiritual essence, which is, this is the true meaning of yoga, is to connect to our higher self. We can have different ways in which we can express this too. So language is really important, because some of us get a little, when I start bumbling off these Sanskrit words, it's like, huh, what's he saying? So we can bring it back to, okay, yoga is the connection to our higher self. And that might be more palpable for some minds, in a sense. But this higher self is the self beyond the egoic structure of our minds. So that's where, when the mind subsides, it's the egoic aspect of me as an individual subsiding to connect to me as the universal aspect of who I am. So, so that's what Patanjali says in the second verse of the Yoga Sutras, just to say, well, this is what it's all about. This is what we're here to do, is to regain this connection and to realize who we truly are. So the aim of yoga becomes this pathway to realize our true nature, or our true self, which we can then say, well, put those words together, self-realization. That becomes the goal of yoga, realizing the self. This is the self with a capital S, which is the universal self, in essence, rather than the individual limited self, which is what the ego constructs. So the egoic aspect of our mind is quite limited, yet it has a big hold on us and keeps us kind of trapped in our individual sort of cage, in a sense. Once you open that cage and let go of the individuality, freedom arises. Freedom is the, like anyone, if they're in a jail, they open the gate and they feel free. They're out in the open. And it's the same with our identity. So it's a process of identity. We identify with the individual self, which is like a little cage. It's something that the ego creates so that we can feel this unique individual aspect of self, a little s, as separate to everyone else. But when we realize our universal aspect, that we are all one, then it's just a great sense of freedom arises, because we're released from the cage of the constraint of the ego. So self-realization, realizing the self, becomes a place of total freedom. And that is, in essence, the highest goal of yoga. So back to the 8 limbs of yoga, back to the question, is that Patanjali gives us, he says, well, okay, this is what yoga is. How do we get there? What do we have to do to realize the self? So he says, well, here's the 8 limbs of yoga. Here is a well and truly tested roadmap that we've been navigating for thousands of years. It's well and truly tested, and now I'm putting it down, stamping it down as a proper kind of map for you to follow, so that you can become self-realized yogis. And so thus begins the journey of yoga, of looking at these 8 limbs. So we are all kind of practicing that already, whether you know it or not, just by the fact that you're here for a start, and the fact that you've been going to maybe a couple of yoga classes here and there, is that you're practicing the 8 limbs of yoga. Having a little bit of intellectual knowledge though, and getting to kind of understand what it's all about, generally kind of helps on that journey to kind of, not necessarily to get there faster or quicker, but just to start to taste this freedom along the way. Because even though the self-realized state is the ultimate freedom, along the journey, it's like we just start to let go of some of the shackles of that cage. Yeah, we start to just open the way and get a few more little glimpses of the sunlight. You know, that cage at the beginning might be completely, you know, you're in darkness, and you start to strip away some of those constraints and let more light into your world, into your being, and so life starts to taste a little freer along the journey. I think this is a really important point, because we often, when we start to intellectualize and look at, okay, this is yoga, we're looking to come into this self-realized state, this awakened state, and then it's like, oh, but hardly anybody ever gets there, so what's the point of even trying? You know, well, who am I to realize the self if you know, there's only a handful of people who do? But that's not the point. The point is the journey. Yeah, the destination is nice, that we might reach the destination, but it's the journey, like any journey that we go upon. When I was in the Himalayas recently, the destination was hearsay, in the sense that I got to the place I wanted to get to, which was Gangotri on the top of the Himalaya. But if I look back at the trip, it was all the travelling to get there, all the little adventures I had on the way, which was the kind of juice of the journey, the juice of the experience. It was nice that I reached the destination too. But even if I hadn't, I would have still come back feeling quite satisfied and fulfilled, that I had a good time, a nice experience. And so the spiritual journey is the same, that we're on this path towards awakening, towards self-realization, but it's the journey that's important. So just the fact that we're here and we start to consider, and we start to, I guess, have this living experience of yoga, then life just starts to become a little easier, a little more kind of free. So those 8 limbs are yama and niyamas, the first 2. And they are essentially the ethics and the guidelines of living a decent life, in a sense. Living A, in a good relationship with the world around you, and B, in a good relationship, and good in the sense respectful relationship with ourselves. And with ourselves meaning even just considering the body and the mind, and just the expressive nature of our the human nature aspect of who we are. So it's essentially, okay, it's kind of like most religions. They'll have like the 10 Commandments or whatever in Christianity. You know, don't go and harm somebody else, that you respect other people's property. Don't steal from others. Don't say, you know, don't speak words that will hurt someone else, or don't say lies unnecessarily. And yeah, what else is there? I mean, santosha, there's contentment, to start to find a little ease with the way things are going in life. So it's kind of just like the ethical guidelines of living in the world with as much kind of respect, ease, and grace as you can. So it's kind of fairly obvious stuff, these yamas and niyamas. I mean, the last couple are a bit more on the spiritual tip, in the sense, one is vairagya. No, vairagya is dispassion. Forget them off the top of my head at the moment, but there is the essence of doing the internal study, so self-study. It's pratyahara is the fifth limb, so we'll get there. Yeah, I forget the exact, but it's studying the self in the sense of starting to do some inquiry into our nature, which is kind of what we're doing right now. This is part of that. It's just having a discussion like this is that. But then it encompasses essentially maybe reading some of these ancient texts, such as the Yoga Sutras, such as something like that, spiritual foundations of yoga, such as the Upanishads. There are many ancient texts in yoga, because yoga's been around for thousands of years. It dates back to the origins of the Vedic culture, which they say around about 7,000 years ago was when the Vedas were written, which were the first spiritual texts that we know of. So it's a well and truly tried and tested system, we could say, that's been around for as long as we know, really. It's probably dates pre that as well, but that's the earliest record we have, about 7,000 years ago. So this is part of this work, is to do this kind of inquiry, and there is the essence of the bhakti part as well, which is what I mentioned yesterday, which is what we'll do a little later, is play some songs. That's just one way of expressing it, but the idea of revering the divinity within all of life. So having a sense in a sense of awe and respect for the magnificence of life and of nature, because nature is, in essence, an expression of the divine, and that's why we're here. That's partly why we're here, just to remind ourselves of the beauty within nature, the divinity within nature that is incredible. I mean, it is really, when we really tune into it, it's magnificent, and it's so, every little inch of it is just, it's a mystery of how it comes to be, and how it works and how it expresses. And it's all here for our enjoyment. We would say that's part of what the purpose is of this human experience, is to just enjoy the show. It's a pretty goddamn amazing show when we just tune into it, because we get very caught up in that cage of our egoic nature. We often just miss the show. We just get caught up in me and my life. Oh, aren't things hard, terrible, da 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 da. Which I'm not demeaning anyone's personal struggles. Of course, we all have that, and that's part of being human. We're always going to have personal struggles. But just to occasionally put the personal struggles aside, open our eyes and go, wow, this is a pretty goddamn amazing show that divinity is putting on for me, really, for all of us. And that's one of the reasons I like to do these retreats in a beautiful place in nature. And just look around. It's absolutely divine and incredible, the expressions of nature in this place here. Magnificent. And such a mystery. And so we just, so that's the bhakti aspect of yoga, is this kind of awe of the mystery, being in awe of the magnificence and the mystery. So these are the yamas and the niyamas, the way in which we, I guess, approach the way in which we live. And then we sort of come into the actual yoga that we understand as the practice or the sadhana. So the first 5 limbs actually incorporate the sadhana. The last 3 limbs are the samayana. So the sadhana, the first 5 limbs, is that which we practice in a sense. It's our practice. So even the yamas and the niyamas, the way in which we interact with the world around us and within us and the reverence and all of that, is in a sense, it's a practice. And then the third limb is the asana. So that's, most people come to yoga for that, and they think that that's what yoga is. It's a couple of, triangle pose and warrior pose. And it is, but it's only the third limb. And as I said this morning, really, traditionally, that was all just designed so we can sit and practice the rest of the limbs. So to sit comfortably, like this, for a good hour or two, takes a good, strong, flexible body. And so that's why we use the asana as a tool. By and by, makes the body healthy and vital, which is a nice thing to have if we're going to have this vehicle for this journey of our lifetime. I don't know, I quite like your car over there. You've got a nice new Tesla. I'd prefer to ride a nice vehicle that kind of goes nice and smoothly, rather than an old bomb that conks out along the way. You know what I mean? So it's like, well, let's work on making this vehicle vital and strong and healthy. And so we have a kind of enjoyable ride along the way, because it's the journey that counts, isn't it? So the asana helps for that. And then, of course, it prepares us to be able to sit and work with the next few limbs. And the next one, so that asana is number 3. The number 4 is the pranayama. The pranayama is the breath work. But more than the breath work, I talked a bit about it this morning, more than just the breath work, it's using the breath to enhance, expand, amplify, in a sense, the pranic value of our being. So we talk about having these, in yoga, these various layers of our being, called the koshas. We've got the annamaya kosha, which is the physical layer. And that's what most of us relate to the most. Yep, physical body, look in the mirror, looking good, not looking good, bad hair day, whatever. This is all physical body stuff. But then we have the pranamaya kosha, which is kind of like the, we're talking about the 8 limbs is like the roadmap to yoga, and the pranamaya kosha is like the roadmap to ourselves, in the sense that it's the network of all the nadis, all the channels, the energy channels of the body. And so this is where the chakras come into play. The chakras are like where these nadis intersect along the spine. And so they're the major sort of highway intersections. And they are, there's a lot more to it. You can get quite mystical with it. And that's where we go really deep into the tantric aspect of yoga, tantra yoga. Because within yoga itself, there's all different kind of ways in which we can get involved in the inquiry and in the investigation and into the mystery of it all. And the tantric is really looking into the ways in which these chakras can work, can amplify, can shift our energy. And then that becomes that connection to the kundalini as well, as another part of this kind of energy manifestation moving through us. Won't go too much into that, because that becomes a whole talk in itself, or a whole course or a whole kind of years of investigation, really. But just to know that that's kind of part and parcel of one of the possible investigations into the mystery. But it's all interwoven with this pranamaya kosha. So the pranamaya kosha is the channels of energy that weave through our system. And it's what, we talk about it in yin all the time. We'll do yin tonight. I might talk about it a little bit. And it's in essence, it's where the energy moves in, we call them the meridians in Chinese medicine. But it's the same thing. Meridians, nadis, energy channels, all the same channels, just different focuses in a sense. In Chinese medicine, we focus on the healing aspect of moving energy in these channels so that the energy moves more freely and releasing any stagnation or any blockages, which can then, this is where all these koshas become interwoven. So if there's let's say a blockage in my lung channel here, say the energy's not flowing here, this is my lung channel, and if the energy's not flowing well there, it may actually manifest as a manifestation of some kind of disease in my lungs. So some kind of sickness or asthma or something like that where I'm struggling with my lungs. So if you go to an acupuncturist, they'll put a needle there to help move that energy again. And then sometimes it could be, on the flip side, a manifestation through the psycho-emotional aspect of our being, our mental stuff. So maybe if we're feeling really depressed or something, that depression could actually stem from a blockage energetically. Of course, a lot of our psycho-emotional stuff is related to our experiences, our conditionings, our what's happened, our trauma or whatnot. But a lot of that then also gets stored in the body and also interwoven within the energy aspect. So moving the energy in those channels can help to sometimes release emotions or some trauma or whatnot. So that's where there's this kind of interrelationship between these koshas, the pranamaya kosha with the manomaya kosha, which is the mental sheath, or the annamaya kosha, which is the physical sheath. But we practice pranayama to make that energetic sheath more vital for the potential of the kundalini. And in essence, just when that pranic sheath is more vital, it also, as I said, it kind of affects the manomaya kosha, so it helps also with the mind itself. And if the ultimate yoga is to settle the mind down so we can see our true selves, then we do need to somewhat steady the mind or quieten it down somewhat, slow down the brainwave patterns even. And so the pranayama helps to do that as well. So it's a tool, a practice to help slow down the fluctuations of the mind. And if we come back to what Patanjali says about the Yoga Sutra, what is yoga? Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga is the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. So using pranayama as a tool to help slow down the brainwave patterns so that the busyness of the mind starts to slow down. Not saying that it's going to fully subside when we sit and just do a few nadi shodhanas, but at least it can slow down a little bit. And we can start to feel maybe a little more clarity, a little more peace. And so even, as I said, the journey is what's important. And that clarity and that peace along the way can just make our load a little lighter. And we start to already experience a little more freedom. So just to sit and do this practice, I'm sure you're all already feeling a little clearer, a little lighter, a little more at peace just from being here for a day and doing these practices than 2 days ago when you were back in the world being busy in your life. Not necessarily, some of you might have been more peaceful then and more busy now, but generally speaking, I would hope that you're verifying that somewhat, or at least you have verified that through these practices. some point in time. But the beauty is, of course, that it's something that, like anything, the more we do it, the more benefits we'll reap.
Sometimes
Over
it might
time.
appear that like more stuff is coming up when you're away, but it's the pranayama can bring the kind of emotional, psychological stuff to the surface.
Mm.
Kind of, it's like a clearing out to then come to a more peaceful space or spaciousness.
Yeah, and it's and even just giving you that chance to notice. Oh gosh, I've got a busy mind. Whereas when you're back in the world, you're so busy in your mind that you don't even notice you've got a busy mind. You're just lost in the mind. At least here you're going, gosh, I've got a busy mind. That in itself is already a nice step on the journey, in the sense of like, okay, at least we're starting to notice the mind and how busy it is. So these first four limbs, as I said, are samayana, sadhana. This is our practice, and the fifth limb is kind of like the go between the other three, the last three. So the fifth one is what you mentioned before, pratyahara. Pratyahara means to withdraw from the senses and go inwards. So even though before we did that little nature walk, those who came, and we used the senses to experience outwards, the magnificence of the forest and the magnificence of the mystery. The idea of pratyahara, to withdraw from the senses, is not to say we can't enjoy the mystery of the world through the senses, because obviously that's what we're here to do. We've got these senses. We've been given these God-given gifts to experience nature through our senses, so that's part of what we're here to do. But in a sense, the other part of what we're here to do is to realize our true nature. This is the self-realization aspect, realizing the self. And by the self, realizing our spiritual nature, so the spiritual essence of our being. And so to do this, generally speaking, even though we can have moments of that realization by connecting with nature, it is also a pathway or way. It's very much the tantric way. But it's also encouraged just to it's kind of like we've got this lens in which we experience life. This lens is our citta, is our individual consciousness, which is the mind, it's the ego, it's our memory, it's the experience of working through the senses to experience the world. And so this lens is generally focused outwards. We're going out into the world, we're looking around, we're connecting, we're talking, we're smelling, touching, sensing the world around us. And so that lens is focused outwards. Now with pratyahara, the idea is, well, let's just switch that lens to look inwards, rather than, not forever, but just for the time that we're going to do this practice. So at the time that we're going to sit on our mat and do our meditation, let's say, and we'll flip that lens and look inwards. And let's see how that kind of goes with that experience. So that's kind of what pratyahara means. It's, okay, withdrawing from the senses. So, and even when we flip that lens, you still might hear a bird, or if you're in the city, a tram, or whatever, feel cold, and the world around us is still going to be in motion, and we're still going to experience it and notice it maybe. But it's about not getting overly involved with it all. Just, oh yeah, there's a bird, there's a tram, but I'm not focusing on that right now. This is my time to draw my attention inwards. And so then the samayana is the last three limbs, which is this inward focus practice, and that's, you could say, meditation. The third of those limbs, so the first one which is the sixth limb, is called dharana. And dharana essentially means, okay, now that I'm shifting my attention inwards, I'm going to really fine-tune that attention. And so to do that, and it's a way of training the mind and letting go of the distractions of the mind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a point of focus, or choose, you could say, even an object of awareness to focus upon. So the object of awareness, if it's inwards, usually it's good to do something within yourself somehow. So it could be your breath. Your breath goes into yourself, which is what most, let's say, Buddhist traditions practice of meditation. It's a breath awareness focus. But it could be on those energy channels. You could focus on the heart or the third eye. These are quite kind of inward focused spiritual centers, we could say. Whatever it is that you choose to focus upon. But the idea is to make this focus, this attention, really one-pointed. So that's really the literal translation of dharana, one-pointed attention, or one-pointed focus on one particular object of awareness. And so the idea is that when the mind becomes fully involved with this attention, initially and regularly, the mind wanders off. Oh, what's going to be for lunch? What's going to be for dinner? What am I doing on the weekend? Noticing the wandering mind. So it becomes like a practice of moving in and out of these distractions, in a sense. So, and the main thing is not to beat ourselves up, because that's just the way the mind operates. It's had your whole life of just distracting you. That's what it's been doing for your whole life. Ever since your individuality was formed when you were a young child. When you were a very young child, you were completely in the oneness. You're completely connected to spirit. You see young kids, little babies, they got no care in the world about any worries. I mean, only they want mum's milk when they're thirsty or hungry, and nappy change or whatnot. But they're not worried about who's president of America or whatever else is going on in the world that you get all hung up about. Because they haven't formed their individual bubble, which is their ego. Their ego is still in the process of gaining that personal identity. So young kids come into the world in this state of bliss and universal connection, until we drum into them that they are an individual being, Johnny this, Johnny that, Johnny good, Johnny bad, Johnny, and eventually you say, oh, okay, I'm Johnny, am I? But initially there's no Johnny, it's just bliss. Because it's coming in pure spirit. Spirit is what we are in our pure connection. So we need to sometimes just check in with little babies, because they know the secret. They're there. And then...
Can I share a different sort of complementary perspective on that idea of babies and children? In Steiner teaching philosophy, or Steiner philosophy, there's the idea that a person is a soul that has chosen to descend. And the reason that babies are so peaceful and blissful is because they are still in the heavens. So their physical body is busy forming and growing and drinking milk and sleeping and staying warm and all of these things, but their spirit is still in the heavens. And it's not until they lose their milk teeth, which is, I've thought of it because my son's losing his milk teeth, it's not till they lose their milk teeth that the internal work is ready to begin, because their body is saying, okay, I'm formed now, I'm here and grounded in the earth, and now I'm ready for my spirit self to come in.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Love that.
we talk a lot about sleeping children, and that's when we can rise back up again when they're sleeping.
Oh, beautiful. Well, in fact, this also goes into the different states of consciousness that we traverse, all of us, every day. The awake state, the dreaming state, and the deep sleep state. And in the deep sleep state, we're back in, totally reconnected to source, in a sense, to spirit. But we don't remember it because the mind has subsided. When the mind is completely subsided, that's when you're in that full connection of yoga. So this is the sort of, that sixth limb is the idea of making that connection with our object of awareness, and in this practice, which is like the prelude, meditation is then the next one. The seventh limb is meditation, is dhyana. But meditation in this yogic idea is kind of like the result of that sixth limb of the practice of being attentive and focused on the one point. So dhyana means kind of, in a sense, like this kind of union or dissolution of separation. So when we're connected to our point of focus, so if I'm focusing on my breath, I see the breath as a point of focus, and it is, in a sense, an object of awareness. So me, the subject, is focusing on the breath as the object of awareness. Now, if my mind gets fully in tune with the idea, okay, I'm just going to focus on the breath, and after some time, then basically that's all that there is. There is just the breath. And the individual bubble of me being separate to everything else, including, in a sense, my breath, dissolves. So this dissolution, we find this union of subject-object between subject me and the breath, my object of awareness. And suddenly there is just the breath. And I'm sure we've all maybe experienced, not to a long degree of this, but these kind of these moments of deep connection, in a sense. They happen all the time when the mind sort of subsides for a moment. You know, it's like the mind just shuts the fuck up for a moment, and there is just this connection to the object of awareness and the dissolution of the separation. So it happens when we're in nature quite a lot. You know, these wow moments, bird flying overhead just a moment ago, and we probably all saw that bird and went, wow, in the moment. That wow moment was the moment that the mind subsided, and there was just you and the bird. But the mind very quickly came back in and goes, ooh, nice bird. Well, wonder what that was, or wasn't that a cool moment? Just to qualify the moment. But if we could lengthen that moment, if we could just be in that moment without commenting, without qualifying the moment, then suddenly you're in yoga, because that moment is the eternal now, which is where we really are all the time. But the mind tends to, because we need to, yeah, we just need to maintain this individual separation, in a sense, because of the egoic aspect of who we are. We don't allow ourselves to just be in the moment quietly. The mind very quickly, and even, you know, we have those moments, we all have them, moments of, oh, that was a really nice quiet moment. But as soon as you said that was a really nice quiet moment, that moment's
come in
gone.
and cover it up.
But there are times when that moment can actually lengthen, and that nice quiet moment just goes on for a little longer. And often that's when we're sitting in our meditation. And that's when the subject-object dissolution occurs, and we're just suddenly present in the eternal now. And if we manage to, and this is where it's like these last couple of limbs, it's not so much I'm going to sit down and practice dhyana and then practice samadhi, because samadhi is the 8th limb, and samadhi is often translated as bliss, but it's essentially this extended moment when you're able to just be in the extended moment without the chattering mind qualifying, quantifying, or taking you away from that moment. Then generally you start to express the bliss of just being in total presence, in the here and the now. And that's why samadhi is called the bliss state, or the bliss experience. And it's something that happens when that meditation, that dhyana, is kind of lengthened, it's expanded for some time. And so all the previous limbs are the practice to be able to then sit in samadhi and have that bliss state. And so that's kind of like the 8 limbs of yoga. But there's a couple of things to just consider there, that, okay, if samadhi is like the 8th limb and that's what we're aiming to do, and then what about after that? What happens after samadhi? You just come back down and you're back into being in the world and worrying about Trump or whatever else is worrying you in the moment. And you know, is that a worthwhile pursuit? Because does that bring us everlasting freedom? So the answer to that is 2, I would say. That A, as I mentioned before, it's that journey that's really important. I think that just coming onto this journey, in a sense, and having little tastes of that oneness, of that bliss, just having little sort of wow moments, or even just aha moments of just starting to sort of understand a little bit about the nature of our minds and the purpose of why we're here, and all of that just helps to start to unravel a little bit of that cage, so that life just generally starts to become a little easier. And even just purely just working with our asana and pranayama to make the body and mind more healthy and vital means that we have a nice vehicle to be able to navigate our journey with more ease and grace. So even just without worrying about samadhi or self-realization, even just purely yamas, niyamas, asana, pranayama, that's all helping to make the journey of life more enjoyable. So that is one reason why you'd want to just keep coming and practicing. But then the other thing to consider is that while samadhi may not, while it's kind of like the ultimate goal in a sense from this perspective of the 8 limbs of yoga, if we read into the Yoga Sutras, that it then suggests there is more than just the samadhi, and that is this other essence which Patanjali calls kaivalya. And kaivalya is not, let's say, a limb in itself, but the whole last chapter of the Yoga Sutras is dedicated to this. It's called kaivalya. And kaivalya means freedom. So kaivalya is the liberated state, or non-state really, because it's tapping into our true essence, which is actually not even a state. It's hard to linguify all this, because it's all beyond the mind stuff. So the mind is trying to explain our essence, our spiritual nature or essence, which is beyond the mind's capability to grasp or language to be able to explain. So it's actually quite tricky stuff to discuss.
It's like the Tao.
Yeah.
Like the Tao, yeah. The first stanza of the Tao it says that the Taoism is the Chinese philosophy of non-dual awareness, essentially, of non-duality. And that first stanza of the Tao says the Tao, how does it go? The Tao that can be spoken of is not the true Tao.
Cannot be explained.
The Tao that can be described is not the true Tao. So, whatever we can try to intellectualize it all, but ultimately it's all about going beyond the intellectualization. But I guess that's a big part of what we do here in yoga, is that on one hand, it's good to have a bit of an understanding intellectually to the best of our capacity to what it's all about. But on the other hand, it's the experiential aspect which is just as, if not more important than the intellectual. So that's why we come to do the practice. That's why we sit, do the pranayama, do the meditation, do all what we do here, so that we can maybe have a little taste of dhyana, or maybe even samadhi. So Kaivalya is this last chapter, which is the idea that you've become fully realized in that essence of your true being. So there's no more needing to inquire, really. This is where the language is really hard. I would like to say you're fully there, but the thing is we're all fully there anyway. It's not like we're going somewhere where we're not already at. Because it's just who we are. We are spiritual beings, or spirits. We are spirit.
This is recognizing.
It's realizing. That's why it's called self-realization, because you're realizing
Awakening.
the self. Remembering who you are. Remember. So there you go. There's a little bit of a summary of the 8 limbs. Any questions or comments on that?
My Zen teacher, I'm reading the Recognition Sutras at the moment. It's been reminding me of my Zen teacher talks about recognizing, as in like remembering what the essence really is.
Well, yeah, teacher says, we're born into the oneness. We know it. Come from it, right?
Just within realization.
Realization of it.
Yeah, it's like Lise often says, we're just walking around. We've all got this amnesia. We've just forgotten. We've forgotten who we truly are. And that's, it's kind of like it's the, some would say that's the cheeky game of spirit. It's like, all right, let's have a bit of a game here. We're gonna, as spirit or God consciousness or universal consciousness, whichever way you want to call the ultimate oneness, is like saying to itself, let's just incarnate as these bumbly sort of humans, and let's pretend that we've forgotten who we are.
See what happens.
And see what happens. See if we can try and remember. So it's like a game of hide and seek. And here we are having this game of hide and seek, trying to remember who we are.
many times a week do you reckon you should practice yoga? I'm just saying on a general rule of thumb, not
It's
like
a daily practice in the
Team India
text.
or something.
Yeah.
24
No.
hours a day.
physical practice.
Yeah,
Physical
physical practice daily.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But morning
they,
and evening.
They do suggest.
There's no absolute with this, and I think within your lifetime there's always this ebb and flow of where you need to be at, or where you should be at, or where you could be at with your practice. But I guess on that, a steady, regular practice is useful, because if one is just kind of practicing sporadically here and there, then it's kind of hard to make good progress in a sense. When you're doing something quite regularly, quite steadily, it's like, you know, you're really training yourself to open those channels, open up that part of your faculty more effectively. So, yeah, it's just creating a discipline, and that's one of the niyamas, actually, going back to the ethics and guidelines. One of the niyamas is tapas, which is having the discipline to say, right, I'm going to come and sit down on my cushion every morning, and I'm going to do whatever it is. 30 minutes every morning of meditation and pranayama. 1 hour every morning of meditation and pranayama, followed by half an hour of asana, or 1 hour of asana. How much can you do? Everyone will say different things. So I've got the kids, I've got the job, I've got the dogs, I've got, we've got plenty of things that will take us away from doing our practice. And then it's up to you to decide, well, how can we manage this juggling act? And some of us have busier lives than others, and maybe it's a little harder. So you've got to work a little harder to slot in that practice. But ideally, a regular practice, a daily practice. And if you miss a day or two, don't beat yourself up. It's okay.
Isn't the ideal 3 a.m.? Is it? Is that in a yogi practice as well, or not? That's definitely for meditation.
4 a.m.
The witching
Well,
hour.
The prana, when the prana.
The prana is more vital in essence at just before sunrise.
Yeah.
So that's the best time theoretically to practice.
But our teacher Clive would always say that self-inquiry is the most important thing, and he says we're stuck with this mind each and every moment, day in, day out. So the practice is ongoing.
The practice is
every
ongoing.
moment thing.
Every moment is a practice of yoga. Every moment to inquire into this kind of nature of your mind and the ego, creating this separation, and then considering all that creates your suffering. Because ultimately, this freedom that we're talking about is freedom from suffering. And this is everyone's biggest issue, biggest problem is suffering. We all suffer to various degrees for various reasons. Whether the suffering is because of our own constraints or ideas or conditionings or whatnot, or whether it's because we're focused on what's happening around us. But the suffering is always there.
An external thing or an internal thing.
And so the freedom is the freedom of suffering, from suffering. That's really the aim of yoga, is to dissolve all suffering, which is a pretty nice idea, isn't it? If we had no more suffering.
Build a foundation, does it?
Sorry?
Does it build a foundation? Because it's obviously like a foundation. You go to yoga, you do a complete, obviously your system, your endorphins work better, your circulation system's better. So your next choice might be a bit better too going forward. So it leads to a different path other than a path where you might have started on the couch and then you actually go from bad to worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, and naturally
Absolutely.
everything kind of drops away. Yeah,
Your
when you
choices
hang out
just
on
in
the
life become maybe more beneficial for less suffering, in a sense. Yeah. Physically, mentally a little better with the practice, and you decide, well, I'm not going to have that Coca-Cola, I might just have that tea instead. And then that makes you feel a little better, and then you might say, well, I'm not going to, go out and get smashed tonight, I might just stay home and read a book on the Yoga Sutras instead. and you feel better the next day. You wake up feeling a bit more refreshed, and your other self wakes up with a hangover and a sore head.
until you awaken, and then you might go to the pub. It doesn't matter anyway.
On Sundays on the way to the gym, there's a 7-Eleven. There's like a nightclub that goes to about 1 o'clock, and I'm walking past there, going to the gym, and some of them are going past there, and their eyes are just everywhere. And
They're going to the gym, they're walking out.
On me.
Well, maybe we'll leave it at that for our satsang.
Unless there's any pressing questions and
Any other comments?
dying to ask a question.
is there, through the practice, is there lots of training about the energy levels that yoga brings, obviously, to mind, body, and the whole lot?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It charges up the system.
Well, it's all working on, and that's the. Don't forget, that's what the prana is. The pranayama is helping to enhance our energy levels. Absolutely. And I mean, I can tell you from my own experience with pranayama, because that's something that I've been doing regularly for many years, just sitting every morning and doing some pranayama practice. Shooting that for that.
Have to jump over him every morning to get to work.
When do you do it though?
The doorstep.
Would you do it first thing?
When she goes off to work. She steps over me. First thing, you wake up and you do your pranayama.
Yeah.
I mean, I go to the toilet generally first. Maybe
Too much information. My yoga teacher, stop
But
You don't want to start and get stopped again.
Well, traditionally you might do a neti pot. Yeah? Neti pot.
do some neti pot
Yeah.
sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Or
Neti pot is,
neti pot.
you don't know what that is, it clears out the
Do
sinuses.
you do that every day, the neti pots?
Well, I do it at this time of year because of
Yeah.
the hay fever stuff, like.
Neti pot, it goes up your nose and down that way. It's a cleansing. What's yummy? Great fun.
Salt water.
Yeah, salt water.
It's a saltwater cleanse. It's similar to, you can buy a saline solution,
Get
but
past the feeling
this
like
is
you're drowning.
the traditional
Yeah.
yogic way.
Oh, I love it.
If you're one, I'd give you an example tomorrow morning.
Oh.
Before pranayama, if anyone wants to see
After
how
the
it
toilet.
works. After the toilet.
We're going to watch a
They
full
make you
window.
meet in the toilet.
Remember the
We get to
steps.
see it's not everywhere too, yay.
There's lots of purifying.
But what I was trying to get to was the fact that having done a regular pranayama practice for several years, I find that really enhances my energy every day. Like it sort of sets me up for the day. And I notice it when I don't do it. Maybe one day or something, not a huge notice. But if I go, say, 2 or 3 days without notice, I feel my energy levels starting to slump. So it's like a charge. It's like it boosts your energy. It really does. So what I'm teaching you here every morning in the hall, that's what I do every morning, pretty much. that practice, and I find it works. And it's also preparing for the potential of Kundalini as well. So that's also a consideration.
What do you mean when you say preparing for the potential Kundalini? Like it comes whenever you least expect it? Or?
Yeah. Kundalini, you can't just say, all right, now I'm going to sit and have a Kundalini rising. Kundalini will arise up to the grace of Ma meaning the nature, Shakti. So it's something that happens through grace. But if it is going to happen, then it's good that you have a system that's prepared to hold its power.
There's different techniques though, like Dr. Joe Dispenza does like a technique which is similar to what you do, but it is like, but he doesn't use the yogi terms, but it is drawing the energy like a straw up through your spine and up to your pineal gland, and then locking those, like those locks, the bandhas that you call, and doing those locks, and then putting pressure on your pineal gland to help activate it. So once you, so he does some different
Who's
on
that?
as well. Dr. Joe Dispenza. So he's I like to follow him, but he's got some different techniques.
So
for that
what
too.
are those modalities like? You see people teach Kundalini
Or
awakening
activating.
online and all like.
Well,
What's it like
they are practices, they are kriyas in essence, different practices to do what, it's what we're doing in the morning. The pranayama practice is a Kundalini practice. It's just that
they just do it specifically to what, so to train people to.
Yeah, their focus, their intention is to awaken the Kundalini. My intention is to make my pranic sheath more vital, so that I have a better energetic value each and every day for helping to calm my mind, but also for the preparation and potential for Kundalini. But it's not like I'm one pointed focus on that, but
It'll come.
it's still in preparation for that. Yeah.
Because it can be a blessing and a curse.
People who say,
Depending on
"Oh,
where
I
you're
help you activate your Kundalini," that's just like marketing.
Most likely, yeah. It's not. You can't just tap someone's head with a feather and Kundalini awakens. No.
Similar to the like, this is how you get rich.
A friend finally did like a Kundalini workshop in Spain.
Yeah.
And she uploaded a video where she's like on the mat, and then there's this guy like controlling her energy, and she's like she's possessed.
So
and I'm like,
that's what it like.
I don't know. I was a bit accepted.
It's marketing.
Like,
Yeah.
if it's like Kundalini has to come from within, right? Like if it's someone's own energy. So having someone externally
Yeah.
saying
Some people have gifts, I guess, of I guess moving energy and being able to have an energetic effect on someone else. So that kind of work can happen where people can do some really quite trippy, weird sort of cosmic stuff that looks like exorcisms, and people have these great releases, and they are probably moving their energy in a sense. But then, sorry?
It can be dangerous.
It can be dangerous if they don't know what they're doing, because you're maybe transmitting, in a sense, your energy, which maybe you've got that greater connection to the source energy. But if you're moving it through someone's energetic channels which aren't prepared to hold that energy, then potentially it could actually be dangerous. But I'm not saying that all of it's voodoo and bad. Some of it could be they know what they're doing, and maybe they are working on actually helping to clear people's energetic system and doing a good job at it. There's all sorts of mysteries within the possibilities of all of this, and some of it's good, some of it's not good. But I think, from my understanding, to awaken your own Kundalini, it's something that you can only well, it's something that only the grace of Kundalini Shakti can allow, in a sense. And generally it happens when you've done the work on yourself. You know, I wouldn't trust a weekend workshop. So come to my weekend workshop to get your Kundalini awoken. That would be for me a big red flag.
Yeah.
Online too,
When again, do
Zoom, yeah.
Kundalini if you don't know what it's about.
And yeah,
you know?
also you don't know where the tradition is even coming from. Or,
Something as simple as holding space for someone in such a way that they feel safe and that an energetic blockage is released because they feel that safety with that person or that practitioner. Like I've experienced it when giving massage and you know, it evokes a conversation with the client and what's happened for you, although you don't talk about it, but that is just that kind of safety and that they've been allowed to release that.
Absolutely, thanks, Jess. Yeah.
it's a very subtle thing as well. I mean, the pranayama just harmonizes the Ida and Pingala nadis or the channels, and once they are fully clear, it's said that then it will rise up the Shushumna channel. Will rise up.
So maybe sing a song or two?
I'm wondering if maybe you need a massage or yeah, it could be a bit cold.
No.
Once we get singing, we'll be right.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think we're right.